Behind the house, just after dusk, Talia is gathering fruit beneath the tree when the air changes behind her, and one of them comes up from the gully. Before she can call out, a hand covers her mouth. Another figure takes her legs, and together they pull her behind the structure. Then the attack changes from abduction to procedure. A substance is mixed, forced into her nose, and spread across her face. Her skin begins to numb. Her face starts to swell. And in the dark, one of them warns the other. "Be careful. You're going to ruin the flesh." Talia fights against the hands holding her down, reaches back, and grabs the helmet behind her. For 1 second, the hand slips from her mouth. She screams. July 2023. San Antonio de Pintuyacu in Peru's Alto Nanay region. Just after dusk, a 15-year-old girl named Talia is behind her house, knocking fruit from a tree and gathering it from the ground beneath her. The work keeps her focused downward, moving between the fallen fruit and the base of the tree, with the house above her and the darker vegetation behind. The first change is not visual. It is a disturbance in the air behind her, close enough to shift the leaves at her feet without moving the trees around her. She turns. One of them is already coming up the slope toward her, closing distance without the movement of a man crossing ground. It reaches her before she can step back. A hand closes over her mouth. A second arrives from the front and takes her legs. One controls her upper body, the other controls her lower body. The one behind her shifts his foot, and something at the ankle engages. The platform beneath him activates, lifting both of them slightly off the ground. The second rises with him. The motion is not stable. They try to lift her fully, but the movement stalls and corrects, failing to hold her in place. After a brief adjustment, they stop trying to raise her and pull her instead behind the structure, out of view of the main yard. At close range, the body resolves into rigid plating across the arms, chest, and legs, with no exposed skin. The head is fully enclosed in an elongated helmet with narrow tinted lenses where the eyes should be. They do not rush. They continue. The contact did not begin in the air. It began on the ground and then changed. What follows is not random violence, but sequence. A substance is prepared in stages. Powder is mixed into a cream, some of it is forced into her nose, and more is spread directly across her face. The effect is immediate. Her skin goes numb, her face begins to swell, and her body starts to lose control. Then a warning is given, not to her, but to the one doing the work. Too much will ruin the flesh. A second instrument is raised into view, small, controlled, emitting a focused light, and when it is brought to her neck, the attack changes again. It is no longer an attempt to seize her. It is a procedure already underway. She fights when the cut begins. She reaches back, gets hold of the helmet of the one behind her, and pulls. He strikes her to regain control, but for one moment, her mouth is free. She screams. By the time she screamed, the work had already started. The scream is what changes the event. Her brother is nearby. Family members are on the other side of the house. Neighbors higher on the slope hear her and come down with flashlights. The yard begins filling with voices, light and movement before the procedure is finished. That interruption is what makes the case different. Without it, the event might have disappeared into the same darkness as the stories that came before it. Instead, the attackers are forced to make decisions under pressure. One wants to leave. The other reaches for her again, grabbing at her hair, trying to pull her back into position before the witnesses close in. They do not get the time. More lights hit the yard, more people are coming. The figures release her, move toward an opening in the trees, and lift. Not by running, by leaving vertically. The movement remains silent until the moment of acceleration, when a compressed mechanical burst cuts through the air and they are gone. She is left on the ground with swelling to the face, 2 marks at the neck, and a body that remains chemically disrupted after the attackers have left. The case did not survive because she escaped. It survived because the village arrived in time to see it break apart. What happened to Talia was not the beginning. It was the moment one attack forced a wider pattern into view. By July of 2023, San Antonio de Pintuyacu was already changing its behavior after dark. Men were organizing patrols. Mothers were keeping children inside. Flashlights and shotguns were no longer ordinary tools. They were becoming the structure of the night. At first, there was still room for a stable explanation. The Nanay basin was already under pressure from illegal mining. Armed outsiders were real. Intimidation was real. Criminal presence did not require a new category. But the reports did not stay inside one village. Across the Alto Nanay district, separate communities described the same basic intrusion. Tall figures, covered bodies, hidden faces, night entry, rapid approach, sudden withdrawal. The pattern was not rumor building inside a single frightened settlement. It was the same account appearing in different places, in the same period, against the same darkness. That changed the meaning of the fear inside San Antonio de Pintuyacu. A threat at the edge of one village can still be mistaken for a local problem. A threat reported across multiple villages is already something larger. Talia was not the first target. She was the first target whose interruption exposed the pattern. San Antonio de Pintuyacu did not respond to the threat with language first. It responded with geography. The village sits along the river, with the landing below, the tambo above, and the houses set between open ground and jungle. As the attacks continued, the villagers cut back the surrounding vegetation to create line of sight and a buffer between themselves and the tree line. The landscape was altered because the threat was arriving from concealment. That matters. A settlement may exaggerate what it hears. It may misjudge distance, sound, or movement. But when people begin cutting the jungle back around their own homes, they are no longer reacting to rumor. They are adapting to repeated intrusion. The landing remained the point where boats arrived. The tambo remained the communications center above the slope. The houses remained where they were. But the space between those houses and the dark had been changed on purpose. The fear was no longer being described. It was being built into the ground. Once the accounts began to accumulate, the safest interpretations started failing in pieces. The figures were described as tall, roughly 2 meters, sometimes more. Fully covered. Faces hidden behind elongated helmets or masks. Witnesses described yellow-tinted eye lenses where eyes should have been. Some described dark armor. Others described a lighter or metallic appearance. The surface details varied, but not the structure. These were not men glimpsed at a distance and exaggerated by fear. They were seen close enough for people to describe rigid plating across the forearms, shins and chest, with a hard exterior that did not behave like cloth. Then came the part that pushed the case further from ordinary criminal intrusion. The figures were not moving through the jungle the way men move through jungle. Witnesses described them elevated roughly a meter above the ground, gliding, lunging, and lifting vertically when challenged. They left unusual tracks, paired circular impressions rather than ordinary boot marks. Some descriptions placed 2 discs beneath each foot. Others described red light from the soles during movement. And when they used the larger platforms, the pattern expanded again. Circular platforms, silent hover, Sudden acceleration, smaller ones for one figure, larger ones capable of carrying two. The village description was not of intruders running into darkness. It was of figures lifting out of it. The movement did not match the men the village already knew. Community leader Jairo Reategi said he shot one of them twice at close range. Other villagers described the same failure in different forms. They fired on them. They set traps. They raised the lines higher because the targets were too tall for ordinary placement. They heard the blasts go off in the dark and found broken lines afterward, along with the same circular tracks in the ground. If the target is a man, the body reacts. It falls, stumbles, bleeds, or flees. That did not happen cleanly here. The figures did not collapse under fire. They did not leave behind blood, fabric, or obvious damage. Some witnesses described a metallic impact sound. Others said one dropped and rose again, but the result stayed the same. Gunfire did not turn the encounter back into something ordinary. The village was still left facing targets that did not behave correctly under force. The guns did not return the case to ordinary reality. The word Pelacaras did not begin with Talia. It was already there. Across the region, reports had circulated for years of bodies found in the river or nearby areas with facial tissue removed. Adult males. A child. Cases remembered not because they were solved, but because the damage was too specific to forget. That is where the name had its force. But those were bodies. Talia was different. Her case did not give the phenomenon its name. It gave it a living witness, physical injuries, and an interrupted attack inside a village yard. That distinction matters because it changes what the case became in 2023. The region did not invent a new fear to explain Talia. It attached her attack to something it believed it had already been seeing for years. So when the name surfaced again, it did not arrive as metaphor. It arrived as recognition. Talia was not the first Pelacaras case. She was the first one that stopped before completion. The name was already there because the pattern was already older than the siege. Long before 2023, Peru had older names for body-stealing outsiders. In different regions, the details changed with the age, but the structure remained familiar. The outsider arrives at night. The body becomes material. The purpose remains elsewhere. And even inside the modern record, the 2023 wave did not stand at the start of an empty timeline. Reports of severe injury, burns, and tissue removal were already sitting behind it. The stories had not begun with one summer and one village. What changed in 2023 was interruption. For the first time, the procedure was broken in front of witnesses before completion. What reached Talia in 2023 was not a beginning. It was a pattern caught in the act. Authorities eventually supplied the explanation that would hold outside the villages. Illegal miners, high-tech equipment, foreign criminal groups using fear to clear indigenous communities away from contested territory. That explanation arrived with real context behind it. Illegal mining was already present in the region. Criminal pressure was already real. Armed outsiders were not imaginary. It accounted for presence. It accounted for territorial motive. It accounted for why a village might begin to fear the night. What it did not account for was the structure of Talia's attack. It did not account for the face being the target. It did not account for the chemical sequence. It did not account for the line about ruining the flesh. It did not account for close-range procedure carried out with enough control that one attacker corrected the other in the middle of it. And it did not account for movement that repeatedly forced witnesses away from the vocabulary of ordinary pursuit and retreat. A village can understand armed intimidation. A village can understand land pressure. A village can understand miners, traffickers, and criminal networks. What it cannot absorb so easily is the possibility that the people entering at night are there for tissue. The official explanation accounted for the territory. It did not account for the work. If Talia had been the end of the story, the case might still have closed around her. It did not. Reports continued through late 2024 and into 2025. Villages remained on alert. Patrols remained in place. New attacks were reported in other locations. The same structure kept returning. Night approach, armored figures, platforms, injury, withdrawal. And when outside investigators brought radios, flashlights, thermal optics, and night vision equipment into San Antonio de Pintuyacu, the phenomenon did not step cleanly into documentation. It shifted. That matters. A panic burns out. A rumor mutates. A misunderstanding scatters. A pattern that continues, relocates, and appears to avoid the places where surveillance has been strengthened is doing something else. Even during interviews, the event had not become memory. Talia reportedly struggled to speak in the presence of tall outside investigators whose height and physical presence echoed what she had described from the attackers themselves. The attack had ended. The reaction to it had not. The case did not end when attention moved on. It changed location. If the official explanation is true, then a criminal team entered remote villages at night, carried out controlled attempts to remove tissue from human beings, and repeatedly lifted out of range under fire without leaving the ordinary evidence such a team should leave. And if the pattern before Talia was real, and the interruption in her yard was real, and the continuation after her was real, then this was not one village under pressure on one summer night. It was an operation already in progress. Be careful. You're going to ruin the flesh. And this is a close encounter.